is Fox. My business is Foxy Flora. And I think this topic is a great one for me to talk about because I have thrown myself into many different market channels throughout my navigation of this industry. And also personally, it's my style, my learning style, I'll say, is to just go full in, like in a bold way, for better or worse. So I really have, I've definitely learned the ins and outs of different market channels within the industry and also, how they worked and how they haven't. And I've made a lot of pivots in the last 9 years that I've been in the business. So yeah, I'm happy to just really just bring the conversation to the aspects of this very unique, I would say, industry that's not just about production. There's a lot of other facets and avenues that you can take. So, and this is an industry that's continuing to shift a lot in our state, so, or in our region at large. So it's a cool conversation. I'll also say that I made a short presentation with I guess the goal being conversation and questions. So I'm hoping for that and obviously available for any questions. Um, should I just begin the presentation? Okay. I'm really cold right now, so apologies for like all this I could probably do with that's getting in my way. Okay. All right, so let me share my screen. And I will I'm not gonna check the chat until after. All right, we on board?
Yep, looks
Yeah.
good.
Oh, all right, great. So I'm naming this exploring different market channels. Determining a market channel. So what comes first? Like it's kind of like the chicken or the egg, meaning do you have an interest in something and decide your market channel based on that, or you see an existing open market channel and go for that. So both. It's like, you know, it, when you're building a business or an idea or endeavor, there's a lot of different entry and access points. But some people, uh, everyone has a different reason for approaching it. So important considerations that we'll talk about is regional context and related industries. For example, I am growing flowers in an area that also has a very rich and robust wedding industry. So that's something not necessarily that I'd have to incorporate, but I'm appreciative and lucky and grateful that that is something I can access if I'm interested. Also, we have a very strong farmers market. We also have a very strong, just small business support and community, I feel, in this area. Your existing skill sets, obviously, is a very strong reason. I'm coming from uh, kind of both a designer and a grower. When I first started, I was already in the service industry for years. Like I've always been kind of, like a server or bartender of what catering, stuff like that. I grew up in that industry. And then I also was a grower and I actually became more veggie production for years and years. And then I decided like I'm going to pivot and work with more of this flower stuff. Profit goals. Obviously, you're probably doing this and interested in this to make a dollar, you know? Lifestyle compatibility. If you're working with the production side and you want to be producing and you're going to need some access to land or like, maybe you already do and you have land and you're figuring out what to do with it. Or you really want to work with flowers and you love working flowers, but you don't really have interest in the production side, then it's the retail and the design. But your lifestyle compatibility already is a huge part and one that's often overlooked, I feel. And then it ends up becoming down the line, years down the line, and you're like, what? How did I end up here? Infrastructure and resources, what you have already at your, like what do you have land, right? Do you have a support system that knows a little bit about it? I didn't come from a farming background. I didn't even come from a small business background. So I had a lot of uh interesting learning curves with just creating my community and my resources and quote really like my panels. Like I created my own sort of support system because of the goals I had in mind, not because I had already they were already existing, if that makes sense. All right. So, important questions to ask yourself. These are just a few. And I also want to say this is a very personal side of the business. So it'll feel more kind of this conversation might feel more story guided because I do think this is a lot of the personal side, even though the goal ultimately is to become marketable and to market yourself as a business. But these just, I think how I might be like projecting from my own experience navigating through the different styles. So it'll feel personal, but of course I can get right down to business immediately too. If your questions can be more, um, oriented towards numbers and logistics, not just the personal story side of it. Anyway, so where do I already spend my time? That's a huge part because there is a lot of romanticizing in this industry, especially because of things like Instagram and, like people wanting to make big pivots. A lot the industry took a really big boom through and after COVID because a lot of people were changing the way that their maybe current job worked. Maybe they were able to spend more time at home. I mean, that was like across the board, everyone was like trying gardening and as a hobby. And then, so it might seem really great and you're like, oh, I can do this. I want to make this big career change or try this thing on the side. I want to buy all these things and invest in this direction. But where do you already spend your time? Are you an outside person? Like really being honest with what already exists in your life. Are you comfortable outside? Like in the elements. If you're imagining yourself being at a farmer's market, like do you already go to farmers markets? Are you interested in being social for like a whole entire day with strangers? Um, are you, if you're like, oh, I'm gonna do this, this, and that, like I want to have you pick, right? Have you ever had people on your property? Have you considered the not repercussions, that's a big word, but the responsibilities of bringing the public onto your space. Um, you can always change like all of these things. I mean, people can always change. And there's a lot of uh considerations that come down the line that it's really difficult to plan before you even start an endeavor, right? So changing who you are and the nature of who you are as a person shouldn't be the first thing that you have to adapt and shift, if that makes sense. There's a lot of skill sets, whether it's like the admin side of things and the organization and the time management part, accounting, things like that, that are oftentimes a learning curve and just, the business of selling your thing. So changing who you are as a person shouldn't be the first part. So just really taking an honest look and an honest conversation of the market channels or the style that you already are, um, to determine where to begin is helpful. What are my profit and income goals? So a lot of people are approaching this as a low income, or sorry, excuse me, low risk. Like the income isn't the goal, is it the driving force of why you're exploring cut flowers? Um, but other people, for me, it started casual, I had other things going on, but then it really became like, oh, clearly I'm putting myself full into this. So I really needed to pay close attention to all the numbers. And I was accounting for every single purchase, every single cent I made, where it went, how it was moving around. Like I needed uh, to be conscientious of where the most consistency was and the most dependable income streams. Um, the other facet of that is how much time, do you really want to spend or can you spend on this endeavor? Like, do you have a full-time job? What does it actually look like? And then setting goals based on that. Last few years, how I'm determining my markets has a lot to do with, the other, how the numbers that I have to look at, luckily, but then also kind of moving backwards. So breaking it down, this is what I want to make the each season. What does it look like per month? per week? What are the market channels that have shown me I can get to that number? So just again, kind of going back to the story side. I'll be moving into my ninth year. I started with leasing land. I now own my farm, but I started leasing land and selling bouquets along my good friend's veggie CSA. So they already had like a long-standing veggie CSA, and I was like, that'll be fun. Let's do this, right? And so I think right off the bat, 30 members, which is pretty good for the first year. But I was at they were at like an outside, really popular bar patio space. So I would come and like fill this whole corner with flowers, and then it became this draw, and people would, I mean, that was like such a hit the ground running opportunity because I was so publicly out there and flowers are so, eye-catching. And I was also spending time with my friends. So we had a really like it's just enthusiastic uh setting that we were in. And so it attracted a lot of people and I just built a strong customer base right off there. People were like, "Oh, do you do weddings?" I'm like, "I don't, but maybe I should." So really the next year I started doing weddings and I became so popular just through that one location that I opened up another CSA. And I couldn't make enough flowers. I couldn't build enough arrangements. I couldn't, like, it was just, the demand was so strong. And so I started expanding. And then went really well for a while until things had to change and I had to make a pivot. That family decided to change the location of their CSA. And so I followed them because it wouldn't have been the same if I stayed at this place without them. And then my numbers totally dropped. I like had to let go of my CSA and it was really sad and it was a really difficult decision for me. And I definitely let down a lot of people, but the numbers weren't there to make it make sense for me anymore. Um, and so then I pivoted towards the farmers market, which ended up opening up a whole different slew of just opportunities and just demographic. Like you reach different people. And again, depending on your interest, it could be good or bad. So I've been finding a lot more wedding avenues again through being at the farmers market. I, I can speak a lot to the advantages and disadvantages of that lifestyle. It's definitely a schlep, a bigger schlep, but it's been worth it. And because the market and the weddings took just a bigger turn, I've had to let go of a lot of more like personal retail sales. Like I used to really like to, have bring a Mother's Day bouquet to my friends, and or like a anniversary gift and deliver it, things like that. But now it's kind of like, well, I'll be at the farmer's market on these days if you want to get something. Like it's just hard to make time for it all. And as I've been doing all these things throughout the years, I've also had other jobs to kind of supplement a lot of the money I needed for supplies and infrastructure and just overhead, along with this living. Um, but my goals are changing, and I think I'm just feeling the effects of all of it and the stress of being a small business owner, and it's just like kind of the inconsistent it's stressful not knowing exactly how to plan finances around having a small business, especially when it's a land-based, weather, nature related. And also just like the fluctuations in your market channels, meaning weddings could change, busyness at the numbers of the market, things like that. So, I'm actually going to try and make a shift away from full-time farming for something more steady. Um, Another thing I wanted to bring up is I've prepared myself many, many times for events on the farm, and I have a great farm for that. But then I just ultimately have not gotten over the fear of having public people on my farm. It's just like a whole other conversation. Um, People are trying to encourage me to do that, but I don't know, I'm not there yet. So it's something that I'm working on. So kind of went into this, but yeah, my CSA changed. Um, The what I'll say about the market is something when I first started, I was going all the time. That's since shifted as well. I only go based on the numbers from my past. So I see in my files, it's like, oh, well, the early spring is really, really, really busy, and it's definitely worth it to get as early in the season as possible. People are just yearning for color, yearning for flowers. Mother's Day is a huge holiday. I didn't I didn't prioritize Mother's Day until years into my business, which has proven to be a smart decision now to prioritize Mother's Day. Um, and then once summer comes, like July, August, markets are just not as busy. So I haven't been attending the markets in the summer. And then the fall, I found that it's pretty inconsistent. So I'm still working with what I want to offer in the fall and whether it's markets. I will say weddings also are much busier in the spring and the fall, not so much the summer. So it's changing the way my business looks, and also helped guide me towards feeling like, okay, I'm ready to maybe not have this full time. Um, yeah. Okay, so within the cut flower world, it's very interesting. Like I said, unique. It's not just so like vegetable production, you're growing vegetables, um, and there's not as much opportunity to sell your vegetables in different ways, right? So it's more whole vegetable form. But for flowers, we have these processing opportunities. I mean, yes, you can make things with vegetables and goods, like have, a value added product after for sure. But within the value added product of what you can do with flowers, there's still more avenues among that. So production is only one part. Then there's retail, um, agritourism, and education. Again, I'm not saying don't grow vegetables. It's just we are we're finding more channels through cut flowers, I think, that are more like unique that haven't been as popular. All right, these are some photos. All right, so production. These types of examples include selling, grow starts, like selling seeds, growing um, from seed into small plants to sell to maybe other growers or other people, large scale growers, or to just the general public, whether it's at, your local plant sales, or, you can sell to your local store, like hardware stores. Like a lot of my friends sell to like Agway and things like that, where other businesses are already selling other plants. Um, More of a production versus retail would be wholesale bunches. So you're not designing, you're not putting arrangements together, you're just selling bunches and you have a price point for your offering. So you're selling bunches either to people who want to buy for events and weddings, or maybe who do events and weddings, other florists, wedding planners, or people. And then you're also selling to the florists, right? So that is a better it's like a different sort of time management consideration. You're not spending a ton of time having to sell your stuff. You're just working on the production, growing it well, refining your systems there, and then the exchange is much more simple, direct, straightforward, and not really the nonsense of like schmoozing people at the market and getting to know people, right? Or like planning this big event. It's a really different thing. And so production might be good for you if you have the space, you have the space, especially to grow high valued, woodies and other sorts of perennials, like peonies, obviously, that take up a lot of space, but only offer you a short window of bloom time, but have high value. So you have the land, you've got the growing skills, you already have developed the patience and understanding around that part. You have equipment infrastructure. Maybe you were looking for labor. That's the other part of why I knew I needed to pivot, because I just, managing of people is another skill set that comes with having a business, but not necessarily an acquired skill. I don't think I want to do that really. I love spending time with people, but when it came down to it, I don't think I ever want to really develop a team. I just don't think that's not something that I really wanted for myself. So the labor part, I end up doing most everything by myself. So that's just very taxing. More flexible time. I would say the production side, you have to really be able to troubleshoot problems related to weather and your systems, figuring out what's wrong, why the irrigation isn't working, your greenhouse plastic blew off, you're, oh no, what the heck's going on? Or we're getting a freeze, it's super late, got to cover everything. Like, just have to really be more available and flexible, I feel. Um, this avenue is potentially less money, but more is more like a lifestyle. Like, I definitely continued down this path of farming, not because I was I'm going to be get rich doing this. It was this is who I am, and this is the lifestyle that works really well for me and feels the most authentic. But there is the tax and toll it takes on your mental health when it's so inconsistent and turbulent, not only the sales, but also the lifestyle. And just, I live on a very, very windy farm. And anyone who's ever talked to me in my life knows that because I talk about the wind every day. Every day. Okay. So design, this is a whole different thing. This is uh completely different. Weddings and events, retail again by order. You're making nice things for to be delivered to someone sweet. Markets or CSA, I would say that's like mid-level. You're definitely wanting to present something really nice, but it's not the level of design necessarily that weddings require. Considerations. You have to work well under pressure. You have to, understand the timeline, deadline, and the professional nature of large events. You're not only working with the pressure of the people, like the bride and the groom and the family that are paying you hopefully a large sum of money for your services, but also venues, other small businesses you're working alongside with. Um, it's definitely beneficial to have a strong communication skill set, correspondence, email. I would say that's the thing I love doing weddings, but the correspondence, keeping up with the email and the planning and the changing and just keeping up with that side of it is the most challenging thing for me and also for my clients. They can feel uncomfortable at times, like, oh no, am I, you dropped off, did I lose you? And it's like, no, you didn't. I'm just literally outside all the time and I cannot find time for my computer. And that is my poor time management skill and also my lack of interest of being on the computer. It's not that I don't want to do your wedding. I love your wedding. So that's something that I've had to get really honest with and continue to figure out what works for me. Um, the budgeting part is major because I you want to be able to not overprice everything, right? Where you're giving them some crazy number because that's not morally right. But also you don't want to undercharge yourself because it is a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of un well, they say unpaid labor, but like things that aren't necessarily easy to charge. You have to really get to know that process because you're putting a lot of money and time of your own into creating the event, right? So making sure your budgeting is definitely a huge part. It's more profit for sure. And I would argue more reliability if you get in with the right groups of people and other small business owners and you have, you're in with the local venues, the other local wedding planners, photographers, caterers, things like that. People will be like, "Oh, I still need a florist. Who should I work with?" Right? And then you'll get recommended. So networking is a huge part of that for sure. And then region and location, right? So I don't know if I had my flower farm in another part of the state that didn't have weddings, maybe I wouldn't have been as drawn to them, you know? So I'm really lucky that the Finger Lakes does have a really strong wedding industry. There's always going to be people coming here for weddings. Agritourism, um, farm tours, workshops, non-related farm activities, things that have nothing to do with the farm, but just having them on your farm. People seem to really eat that stuff up. You pick farm stand. I would put that under the agritourism. Seasonal draws. So people love fall. Like they would just go crazy, right, for the pumpkin patches and I flower photo shoots, things like that. I grow all sorts of stuff like that. And like, for example, this photo of one of my sunflower fields, I grow all sorts of really beautiful masses of things oftentimes just because that's what I do. But I don't ever bring people on my friends and family for sure. But like I definitely could be doing more with the agritourism. And I'm hoping I get there one day. But again, considerations, comfortable with the public coming to your space. Maybe if I didn't live on the farm, I'd feel differently. The liability piece for you want to make sure you're covered 100% and like everything is safe and your insurance is appropriate. Uh, Depends heavily on your location, right? So like you people may not be as interested if you're so far out. I would say like, you got to be close enough to something, maybe. I don't know, maybe not. So it really depends on your region and what you're offering. And then just the enthusiasm part, right? I remember going on there's actually two farm tours in specifically in my memory that could have been completely different experiences, but I think that it was the combination of burnout and just they, you know, weren't really happy with what they were doing. And I'll never forget like feeling why are they inviting us onto their farm? Like why are they holding this event? Why are they marketing themselves, right? As like this public space. It's miserable to be like over here right now. What's going on? So you don't want to burn yourself out and then continue on this path and like, I don't know, expose yourself in that way for your reputation if you're not really happy to be sharing it, right? All right. Education, experience, and fear. I have tried literally everything and I've made all sorts of customizations and modifications of all sorts of systems out here. Um, and so I love to talk about all the different ways I've tried things and the successes and failures among that. Whether it's for infrastructure or growing, right? Or like, I don't know, just trying things out. And the neat thing about that too is that there's virtual options. We are on our computers right now. I don't need to leave my farm. And you can do that with growing or design. I haven't really done a lot of design educational stuff, but I do think that if I was to start offering like, floral design workshops, bouquet building, things like that, I'm sure it's a popular avenue. Kids groups is something I've also really, really wanted to do on the farm. Um, I love kids and I've worked with kids a lot in different other parts of my life. And so I still do want to unite those two groups, in the same avenue. But I just want to like I haven't gotten there yet, the organization part. So, all right. So that's the organized part of my conversation. But I would love to share the talk, with you at this point.